of the Frankfort Plant Board. This is a special meeting pursuant to the governor's executive order. We're meeting with 10 or less people in the room, and it's a special meeting because we're only limited to discuss the items that are on the agenda, and we can't discuss any other items that are on the agenda tonight. So with that, Madam Secretary, you want to call the roll?
Member Hale?
Here.
Member Keybine?
Here.
Member Mason?
Here.
Member Snyder?
Here.
Member Dutton Mitchell?
Here.
We have a quorum and are authorized to do business. Next item would be item 2.1, consider approval of minutes of the August 18th, 2020 board meeting and the September 9th, 2020 special board meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? Any corrections, changes, to either one? Do I have a motion to accept the minutes for those? Do we need, Kathy, a motion on each set of minutes, or can we take one motion on both?
You can do one motion and do both.
Okay, so can we have a motion on the minutes of August 18th and September 9th?
So moved.
Do we have a second? We have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Minutes are adopted. Item 3.1, action considering accepting the financials for the month ending August 31st, 2020. Mr. Denton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cubine. Frankfort Plant Board is a nonprofit municipal utility. We have a fiscal year that ends in June 30th of each year. So I'd like to present tonight our financial statements through August 31st, 2020. That'll be our first 2 months into this current fiscal year, 2021. So I'd like to turn to page 23 of your board packet, and let's start with the statement of net position as of August 31st, 2020. Looking at line 65, you can see that the Frankfort Plant Board had $189.7 million in assets, with our largest asset class being our property, plant, and equipment, net of accumulated depreciation of just over $115.5 million. Looking at our liabilities, line 70 through 130, total liabilities as of August 31st of just over $92 million. And our net position at that same date of just over 97.7, bringing our total liabilities and net position to $189.7 million. You can see from our presentation of July's to August, there's not been a significant amount of change. I'd be glad to go over anything on the statement of net position. Any
You want to
questions you may
highlight,
have?
David, maybe the change of August this year, of this time this year compared to last year, which was pretty much in cash and in investments?
I'd be happy to. You will notice we did have a decrease of $10.4 million in our cash balance and an increase of $17 million on our cash and investments. So the decrease in cash is moving cash into our investment class category. So that describes a decrease in cash and investments, or I should say cash. In investments, we've had three major projects that we have been set rates accordingly to be able to cover. And we've had each of those projects we've gone a little bit different schedule than what we had in the budget. So that has allowed us to accumulate cash for those projects, and also with our changing to a new wholesale power provider in May of 2019 has given us a significant decrease in wholesale power, which has also contributed to our increased cash balance, which we've moved to investments. So I think that'd be a good time to turn over and look at our cash and investment schedule on page 24. On page 24, line 80, you can see total restricted and unrestricted cash of $10.6 million. You can see that's down $10.4 million, and below are restricted and unrestricted investments, $35.3. Compared to a year ago, that's up $17 million. So, Mr. Cubine, as you had mentioned, those are the reasons for the changes, and we're going to be talking later in the agenda about this as far as restricting some of our cash and investments. And we'll probably be referring back to this schedule on page 24, I think, during that item as well.
Okay.
If you wouldn't mind turning to page 25, looking at our bonds, leases, and loans payable as of August 31st. Most of our debt service on our debt lines are semi-annual payments in December and June, so we did not have any payments in the month of August. It is worth noting in our 5-year budget that is out and available on our website, you can see our current balance of $31.6 million in loans, leases, in bonds payable over the next 5 years is expected to be decreased down to $18 million. That's a 43% decrease in those balances, which will result in a decrease of $2.6 million in debt service annually, which we hope to put that money back to good use in funding infrastructure projects. So that is good news to report. And I'd like to briefly talk about the financial performance of the plant board over the last 60 days, looking at page 27. This is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position for the first 2 months ending August 31st, 2020. You can see our total revenue, operating revenue, line 20, the third column, just under $16.4 million. I'd like to just highlight 2 items here. You'll notice from a year ago, our electric revenue is down about $700,000, and that is, our rates have not changed. Electric rates have been the same since July of 2017. So that is from a change in usage. Our usage for electric is down 2.85% compared to the same period a year ago, which explains that decrease in revenue. That is okay because we resell power, so we had a decrease in the wholesale power expense as well. But looking at water revenue, you can see that we're up a couple $100,000, which is due to an increase in our water sales to customers, increase of almost 11% from a year ago, which rates have been the same as water this year as they were last year as well. So that explains that, with telecom revenue being very much in line with a year ago. Looking at line 50, total operating expenses of 11.5, bringing our gross contribution to just over $4.8 million. When you take out general and administrative expenses on line 285, $4.2 million, add in our other revenue, and you'll see a net contribution for the first 2 months of $874,000. We provided this statement of revenue, expenses, and change in net position for all of our 3 divisions and our administrative departments, plus check registers for our 2 most active operating checking accounts. I'd be glad to answer any questions you have, but that's our summary for August 31st.
Any board members have any questions? With that, seeing no questions, I guess we need a motion to accept the financial report for August 31st.
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
Have a second? Anybody have any further discussion? If not, financials, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Financials are accepted. Mr. Denton, you want to update us on the elevated past due customer account balances?
Yes, sir. I'd like to talk to the board briefly, just kind of update you on where the plant board is and some of the effects we've had COVID-19 on our financials, primarily as it has impacted our past due balances. I'll give just a little background that it was mid-March. I think it was just actually we closed the office right after our regular March 2020 meeting. FPB voluntarily implemented a temporary suspension of our service disconnections for non-payment and also waived late fees to assist customers during what was and has been an extraordinary health and financial event for our customers. On May 8th, 2020, the governor, Kentucky Andy Beshear, issued Executive Order 2020-323 that actually suspended utility disconnections and required waiving late fees during the state of emergency executive order that he also issued. So as we sit here today, those orders are still in place. It's not surprising. The suspension and service disconnections and late fees were to help customers as the economy came to a halt and work and jobs were disrupted. So we have seen an increase in the number and dollar amount on our past due accounts. There's a chart that's been provided on page 87 to kind of give you just a little look. It's kind of a combo chart showing the number of accounts and the dollar value of accounts over the last couple of years. Something worth noting is that our customer service representatives are doing a really good job of reaching out to our customers that are past due and proactively making calls, working with customers as much as we can on setting payment arrangements. We are definitely stretching those payment arrangements out further than we ever have because of the increase in balances. I have with us a customer service representative, April, if you would like to have questions for her or myself to talk about how this is going and anything you would like to talk about related to past due accounts.
I guess 2 questions I'd maybe just start off and ask. One, these are amounts that are past due. They've not been forgiven. That's correct?
Correct.
And just basically what I understand, this is the total amount of bills that are past due. And we've kind of got a unique situation in, we've got the governor's order, which would cover electric and water. This also includes in here internet, cable, and telephone. But those are a relatively very small part of the past due amount, correct?
That's correct.
So, given the governor's executive order, if the board was interested in dealing with this, all we could really deal with would be telephone, cable, and internet, which would get into the fact that one of the things, without knowing who they are or whatever, that we've got kids in these homes which affect the internet. So it really takes us down to cable, which is what, I think you told me maybe about 50-some thousand
Yes, sir.
is all the cable parts worth of that total. And then telephone would even be a smaller amount than that probably, certainly. So, I mean, if the board wanted to deal with it, there's very little option. And I guess the question really comes, it is such time that the governor lifts that executive order, then we get into the situation of what the procedure would be or what would happen for customers who want to try to get it resolved, and what are the options at that time. If that's a fair question to start off with.
Well, and I think at this point, that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to be proactive and reach out to those customers and have those conversations now instead of waiting until the order is lifted. And we've had a really positive response from our customers. A lot of them have actually thanked us for calling, because those are hard conversations to have. If you've never found yourself in a position where you've had a past due balance or you've had to decide what bills to pay, it can sometimes be embarrassing. And so the customers have really been receptive to that and thanked us for calling them and being proactive. Of course, like David said, our rules have changed a little bit. Prior we had guidelines that you would have to pay your balance within 30 days. We know that we're going to have to take some of this out with customers. We're going to have some long-term arrangements, because you have customers who haven't paid, haven't been able to pay in the last 5 or 6 months. So we've taken that into account, and all of our CSRs, they are more than qualified to be able to make those arrangements. But we're just trying to reach those customers before it gets to the point of we're disconnecting their service. And that way they can go ahead and be proactive and go ahead and make payments now if they can.
What are you finding? Are people trying to make partial payments, or are they just kind of letting the balance roll? Or
We've had quite a few who've actually paid off their past due balance. It just took a call from us just to kind of remind them. Or maybe they got a chunk of money in from unemployment or something like that before we called. But yes, we have customers, they're paying what they can. They might pay $100, $150, $50. They're paying what they can over the phone, and then they're setting up an arrangement that they think that they can, work with. And of course, we're flexible. So if something happens and say they're supposed to pay $50 this week and they can only pay $25, it's not like we're, harassing them or disconnecting their service, because obviously we can't. But we're definitely working with our customers, which we always do. We before COVID, we've done this. People have large water bills because of water leaks and those kind of things. So we're used to making these type of arrangements. We just know it's on a larger scale at this point, because we find a lot of our customers have, found themselves having a hard time to pay.
what would be say the governor's, I don't want to pick a date because I don't want people to think that there's a date out there, but at the time the governor's executive order expires, then we've got a number of customers with past due bills. Then would we then formally, officially send customers a notice saying, this is your bill, you need to now start making arrangements? Or what would that process even look like when the executive order expires?
So it's my understanding, and Hans can correct me if I'm wrong, that we actually have to send out a second notice and give them a disconnect date. So at that point, we would send out notices to our customers to let them know that, disconnects would be. Because currently, we are still sending second notices. They just have a little blurb on there that says, we're currently not disconnecting at this time. But just to make them aware that they still have that balance. So we would have to send out that second notice. I'm sure we would, advertise on Facebook and all of our social media that this is coming. We definitely wouldn't want to blindside our customers. So it wouldn't be like, today he says we're going to start disconnects and then tomorrow we start disconnects. I don't think that's not a reality. We would definitely give our customers
And how long would the
plenty of
window
time.
be from the time they got a second notice to when actually a cutoff? How long would they have to come in and make arrangements once they get that second notice?
I believe it's 11 days is what that notice allows. I could be wrong on that, but I believe it's 11 days.
Is that 11 days our own rule?
I think it might be, I think it's yeah. I don't think it's just ours. I think
But
it's.
we could be more liberal if we wanted to be.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
we could set it out even further. I think we're required by law to give at least 10 or 11,
Okay.
or by the public service.
Turn it over to you, board. Any questions?
Do you actually have any statistics or data so far on the amount of people that, when they're contacted, that are either paying or setting up a plan?
We have about 12% of those in that group that have actually made arrangements. I didn't get the percentage on the actual payment, but it was probably, I would say, half of that, like maybe 3 to 6%. I couldn't quote it. But we have had quite a handful of people that have just paid the full past due balance.
So I think so 12% of the customers we've contacted have made an arrangement
Yes.
so far.
Dawn, Steve, John?
I just appreciate y'all being proactive and talking with people so they're not surprised when the time comes.
Yeah, I think our customers, like I said, they've definitely been receptive. And that's the one thing we want customers to know is that we are here. Like, we want them to reach out to us, even if we haven't reached out to you yet, because there probably are some customers that we haven't made it to. You can always reach out to us, and we'll be willing to help you any way that we can. Because and also we, are aware of resources such as agencies and things like that we can advise them to contact if they find themselves not being able to pay at all. And those agencies help with more than their electric bill. So we definitely have the resources available to be able to help them.
Well, and it's probably not too soon to ask. I mean, we're still in, 80s and 90 degrees. So we're not that far away from winter. Mm-hmm. And based on what maybe ever is available in LIHEAP, what's available locally in rosin, other type things, what do we look like if we didn't have this large amount of past dues because of the COVID? Going into the winter, do you have any feel what we look like in terms of, because we're always going to have some issues come up in the winter in terms of cutoffs and so forth, although there's restrictions there about when people can be cut off
Correct.
because of temperature. Any feel for what we look like going into the winter?
Without having a crystal ball and knowing exactly, when the governor's going to lift the restrictions and as well as how long, the COVID situation is going to go on, I really don't. You've got customers who they are definitely trying to help. I do know that we've noticed a lot more agency assistance coming in than normal at this time from our, multiple agencies. So hopefully that will be a good tool for our customers continuing on, like you said, with LIHEAP and those kind of things in the winter to be able to assist those customers. But as far as projecting the past due balances into the winter, it would be hard to do.
We normally run about $1.2 million in past due balances being rolled month to month during the winter, and we're currently sitting at 2.2 million more than that. And at the rate we're going, people aren't being able to catch up, pay as much as their next bill is adding on to the balance. So I think it's just going to continue to grow, unfortunately, the way we're going.
Steve?
Just a question. I wonder if we had any records, and I assume we do have records that show who has historically been cut off during those winter months, and I don't know if there's records of assistance for those customers, but who those customers are and if they are part of this group right now that are deficient in their payments. That would probably give you some predictor as to, if it's going to be the same size group going into the winter if we're still in this situation, or if there may be others that come into that. But I would suspect that group is already in this group.
Yes, sir. You're accurate. That group is already included, and we've now have folks that have never been in the situation that are there. For those watching, something we can proactively do as customers is take part in our Roundup program. If customers go onto our website and sign up for our FPB Roundup program, would allow you to round your bill up to the next dollar, and that money would be collected and sent to our Bluegrass Community Action Winter Care program. So that's an active way. We also have gift certificates that can be purchased to give to people who you might want to give them to, not just as a Christmas gift, but actually as a to help us through this time as well. So
Susan
those are,
says Merry Christmas like a gift card from FPB, right?
you've got that right.
Actually, it's not bad. I mean, it's like getting a gas card. I mean, it's,
It's most people's,
Yeah.
behind your mortgage, your next highest bill.
yeah. That was an information item. We don't have to take any action on it, but I think Gary and David thought it would be a good time to update everybody on kind of what the status was. So,
Thank you all.
Thank you
Have a
for
good
everything you're
evening.
doing.
Thank you.
Ms. Poe, do we have anything on public comment?
No, sir, we did not.
Okay. Next item 5 is kind of the departmental. We're doing them different than we had been in the past simply because of not asking a lot more people to be here at the meeting and the limitation to 10. But I guess what, Vince, you have the department roundup for us?
Yes, sir. I'll quickly give you kind of an update. For the telecom department, those are pages 89 to 92 in your packet, and you have those statistics, so I won't cover those. But right now, the telecom department's working on moving the satellite dishes that are up at the reservoir property per those agreements, and working on fiber links for the internet backhaul. And then, of course, our construction and engineering groups are continuing to work on fiber to the home with our contractors and doing the extensions that we normally have. The electric department, which is on page 95 through 101, you'll see the statistics there that we normally put in. The crews have recently been working on their reconductor projects that are in our budget for downtown, South Frankfort, and those kind of areas. Our substation department has been working on setting up the AMI meter testing lab as part of our AMI project. So those things are going pretty well. We're working on our projects that are in the budget. The SEPA report, which is on page 103 to 105, for this month of July, we cleared $116,000. And so far for the calendar year, we have cleared $473. So that's pretty good. I think we're doing pretty good so far this year. The water distribution report on page 109 to 111, of course, we have the statistics there that you're used to seeing, but I'll also add to it that we've been doing our hydrant flushing, so that's about 98% complete. We usually do that in the summer, and it wraps up at the end of summer. The meter crews, they're setting up a testing lab as well for the AMI project for the water portions of that, so we're starting to do some of the very early pieces involved to get ready to move forward with that project. And then the Division of Water has given approval for our plans for 2nd Street, our piece in the Water Department of the Tiger Grant that we'll be doing down on 2nd Street. So that's been approved, and we will start some of that work in the next 2 weeks. And then that brings us to the water treatment plant. That report is on page 113. And pumpage has been down a little bit this month compared to previous years, but of course it has been quite a bit milder. And we have had a bit of rain, but still we treated 238.434 million gallons for August, which averages out to 7.69 million gallons a day. So that's kind of the update on the operations side of the house, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have on it. Yes, sir.
Just a question on the SEPA. Was not projection around 600 for the year, the annual?
$716,920 was
Okay,
what
so
our estimate is for the year.
We're
Yes,
pretty
sir.
close to running, I guess, on.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Where are we at on the reservoir, the whole project moving forward at this time? Procurement, bidding, engineering, everything. Where's that stand?
They are still working on the final designs. That piece is still working for the actual tank and stuff itself. We are working on moving the dishes that have to be out of the way first. So the preliminary items that have to get out of the way to start, those are currently being done right now. Let me think. The other piece is the tower. We're getting bids together and quotes to be able to take that tower down that exists and then install the new one. So the early parts of that are moving along. But I don't think the final design pieces have not come back yet from the engineering firm for the tank itself. That should be coming in pretty soon.
But everything's on schedule?
Yes, sir. Everything's going pretty smoothly. I know they are meeting. The landscape committee has been meeting with Tanglewood and representatives from the board. And we've had one meeting, I think, getting ready to have another.
Yeah, have one tomorrow.
Okay. So
And those are public meetings, right? Those are, anybody can attend who wants to?
I'm sorry, it's Thursday.
Thursday, yeah.
It's Thursday, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So So
And when's
it's
that,
gonna be-
just for information, since we're live, when's that meeting on Thursday? Do you have that?
At either 1 or 1:30. Hold on, let me check my calendar. Or Vance, do you have it right off?
It's 1:30. I just wanted to make sure I had my notice right. If it was tomorrow, I
No.
need to make some changes.
It's Thursday. I
Is
never
it
know
here?
what day it is anymore.
Is that a Zoom or is it
Yes,
in
ma'am.
person?
No, it's an in-person at 1:30 at the Plant Board Clubhouse.
Okay, up at Tanglewood? Okay. Okay. Any questions for any of the things that Vint brought up? John?
While we're on the reservoir, when's the schedule for us to break ground on construction for the reservoir?
I do not remember exactly when it was. It was be sometime in the spring, if I remember correctly. Because the final design will come in, then we'll put the RFPs out and evaluate those bids. And then, of course, the better weather to start this project. I think it's a 9-month time frame, if I remember correctly, to actually do the construction. So I can't remember exactly when it started. It was sometime in the spring.
And everything's in place, I guess, Dawn, you're working with, as far as making sure the neighborhood knows the schedule and what's gonna happen.
Yeah, representatives from the Neighborhood Association will be at the meeting on Thursday.
Okay. Gary, were you gonna talk about KyMEA?
Sure.
Or Vint?
I definitely would like to update the KyMEA. KyMEA had started a process called Integrated Resource Planning, IRP process, more than 3 months ago. And basically looking for issue in front of us is the 100 megawatt contract beginning of 2019, end of 2022, May 31st. That's the 100 megawatt Illinois Power contract will be end. So the KyMEA try to looking for what's the resource they can come in, replace that 100. And we actually already have a pretty major piece in place. The solar contract KyMEA signed, the 54 megawatts, that will be in this 2022 too, for 20-year contract. So all KyMEA really looking for is any additional they needed to cast between the difference of the 54, or because reliability reason, the solar you cannot do 24/7. So what do we need to do for reliability reason to replace the piece what we needed? We going to make a decision soon in next 2 weeks. Preliminary discussing is board will vote, I hope next time, to looking for potentially transmission study to request additional transmission between us and MISO. Once that study done, then we will say how much we needed. I'm guessing no more than 45 for transmission to tap in more into the market, the balance between the solar and what energy we needed in the summer peaking time. That's kind of where we are. Staff had done quite a bit of study for some of the small rice unit. In my view, those really is in the depends on the transmission study. If end of the day on the emergency, the transmission is not available, that potentially can be an option because of keep light on is the most important for us. But I'm not sure that's going to be the primary choice. So we do the transmission study first, then to looking for is there any reliable resource for that piece. Then we can look into after that. So that's kind of primary purpose we're looking into it. Hope we can have a more updated result report to you. If any question you want to ask me, we're happy to answer. On KyMEA, most part we're looking for the renewable part. And in my personal view is we should have as much we can, as long as not negatively impact our rate.
Questions?
Yeah.
See?
So Gary, if they follow that scenario, that would keep us, in a sense, out of a long-term obligation
Yes.
at this point?
The transmission new study most likely only 5
Yeah.
years from 2022 to 2027 because the Deep Hand Creek concern and also current the 162 megawatt firm transmission also end of 2027. So in that time we can look into that in the future in the next 7 years from now.
I was contrasted versus the other alternative between
Yes,
the two.
yes.
Yeah.
Correct. You are correct.
Yeah.
John? Anything? Don? Catherine? Gary, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other things on the departmental reports? Okay, the next one, item 6.1, consider accepting the clean, unmodified, you used all the adjectives there, didn't you, buddy? The clean, unmodified audit report prepared by Crow LLP for fiscal year to June 30, 2020, as required by KRS 96-185. Mr. Denton?
Yes, Mr. Cubon, as stated in the agenda item, the KRS statutes that FPB falls under does require an annual audit by an outside public accounting firm. The Board of Directors did retain Crow LLP as our auditor for this fiscal year ending June 30, 2020. This will be the fourth year that we've had Crow on the audit. Tonight we have with us Scott Nickerson, partner with Crow, and also Daniel Levitt, is the managing auditor on the engagement. So I'd like to just go ahead and turn it over to them to go through and give you a little audit report overview. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Great, thank you very much. I think in your board packet, starting on page 117, is our draft audit report. We were engaged to perform the audit for the year ended June 30, 2020. And part of that audit is to provide our opinion on whether or not we believe management's financial statements are materially correct and that disclosures follow the appropriate standards. We're happy to report, with the long title of clean, unmodified opinion, that we did come to that result in our audit, and that's incorporated in our independent auditor's report on page 119 of the PDF packet. And basically that points out management's responsibilities and also our opinion stating we believe the financials as prepared by management are materially correct. I think one of the things that's interesting about the meeting so far is you've covered many topics already that are subject to the audit. You've talked about the impact of COVID. You talked about collection of receivables. You talked about or we'll be talking about restrictions of cash and also be talking about conflict of interest processes. So those are all things that we take into account when looking at the audit for the year. One of the key areas that we focused on in the audit is, as usual, we're looking at the fiscal year itself of June 30, 2020, but more important than ever was looking at what happened after June 30, 20 as well, and what we call that as a subsequent events review. So we did spend time with management to walk through both the results that may have impacted you in that March through June time period, but also what's happening from July until till today. And I think one of the things that we found as we compare your entity to other entities is, one, you're an essential service, so there's that built-in you have to operate. Two, you've already alluded to the potential risk related to no shut-off orders and the impact it might have on your receivables growing, as well as looking at your allowance for doubtful accounts. So that, those are really some of the highlights that I'm not going to go over twice. But what I did want to do is to point out that management does prepare a management discussion and analysis, which is on page, starts on right after our audit opinion, on page 121. This is a good summary for board members, stakeholders to get a condensed version of what management thought was important related to the changes in their operations during the year, changes in revenues and expenses, and pointing readers to what are some of the things that may have changed year over year, so they don't have to go through another 50 pages to figure that out. It's similar to a prospectus, as you're in the private sector. So those pages 121 to 127 provide you a little more background as to the reasons for some of the changes. So I do encourage board members to read through that and ask questions. On page 127, management did add one paragraph related to COVID-19 at the top of that page, basically acknowledging some of the things that David shared earlier in the presentation about the executive order and the temporary suspension of service disconnections, and also the processes you're going through, and as well as recognizing that you do have cash balances to allow you to absorb some of the cash flow issues that may result from non-payment. On page 128 of the PDF is the balance sheet, which shows the assets, liabilities, and net position of the organization. As I mentioned previously, you do break down, or David had mentioned restrictions of cash and investments. You can see there are several lines that are associated with that. We see unrestricted cash and cash equivalents, which is $13 million compared to $24 million in the prior year. We see unrestricted investments, which is $30 million versus $12 million. And then we see some restricted reserves, which are smaller amounts under non-current. I think David already explained the transition between cash and investments, really just moving money from being held in cash accounts to moving them into investment accounts. We also look to see the extent of what causes a restriction. Typically, a restriction would be related to an external factor that would say you have to use those funds for certain purposes. The unrestricted may include cash that the board has designated for future use, and that's something you could disclose if you choose to go deeper into your analysis of restrictions. But overall, your assets increased about $10 million, and primarily in the areas of primarily cash going up was a big contribution, and then your capital assets going up was the second big contribution. From a liabilities and net position standpoint, which is the second half of the page, that shows your obligations both on a short-term and a long-term basis. Current liabilities were approximately $18.1 million versus $19 million in the prior year. Not any significant changes year over year. Long-term liabilities, really the main areas that we focus on there are your long-term debt, your bonds and KyMEA notes, as well as the obligations you have through your pension program, net pension liability, net OPEB liability, which is due to your participation in the Kentucky plans. And that's information that gets recorded at year end. So that's something you may not see throughout the year in your financials, but management records the changes in those activities at year end for the year end financials. I skipped one thing on the asset side. On the accounts receivable side, I know there were some questions on how receivables have changed. Receivables did increase about $2 million from $10.6 million to about $12.6 million, which management has attributed to some of the delays in payments and the no shut-off orders. And management recorded an allowance of about $606,000 as of June 30th for their estimate of potential non-collectible accounts. That estimate's recorded, it's not a write-off per se of customer accounts, but just estimating what may not be collected and recognizing expense in the current year rather than waiting to a future year. So the balance sheet, obviously is important because you have a lot of capital assets and you have debt supporting it, and then you have the obligations and the benefits that you promised your people through the net pension and net OPEB liabilities. And your balance sheet is very similar to other utilities that we work with overall, as far as the amount of cash and investments on hand to cover operations, the financing of capital assets that are generating revenue, and then also the majority of your net position is associated with that net investment in those capital assets, which is shown at the bottom. I think one of the key things to understand is that unrestricted net position, which was about $12.3 million, that basically says if you were to liquidate all your obligations, that would be an estimate of what you would recover. But that's a big assumption based on historical values of your assets and so forth. On the income statement side, starts on page 129 of the PDF package. And that reflects the operating revenues, operating expenses, and other revenues that come into the organization. And this is at a higher level, kind of a condensed level, showing the breakdown of the $100 million of revenues between electric, water, and telecommunications. In the back of the financial statements, you can see a lot more detail about the revenues and expenses for each of those different operating units. But overall, you did have a net increase of about 9.4 million compared to 10.3 million in the prior year. And if you think about the activities of the organization, you have to generate, positive net income in order to generate cash, in order to pay your debt and to reinvest in capital year over year. And that's how you use that information, in your rate setting to determine what cash flows you need to cover the activities of the organization. So we typically would expect to see a positive change in that position year over year. We are happy to report that there were no audit adjustments other than the main adjustment that gets done by management at year end is the pension and OPEB, and that could impact the income statement different than what you may see during the year. But that impact is a non-cash impact, just due to timing differences. I think the fact that management's able to prepare the financial statements and also no audit adjustments is a good indicator that the information that you're getting throughout the year can be reasonably relied on to make decisions. If we were to see a lot of adjustments at year end or catching up, or where management doesn't have a good handle on those financial statements, we might come to a different conclusion. So that's just a high level summary of the financial statements. Also in the package, on page 169, actually, the rest of the financials are note disclosures and cash flow information. That information is very similar year over year. So I'm going to move to page 169 of the PDF package. And that is our management recommendation letter. And basically this is providing feedback to the board on areas where management may be able to make continuous improvement in their processes. I think the first one that we have here is related to conflict of interest statements. And this is a recurring item that we have shared with management. I did see that you have an agenda item to refresh or look at your conflict of interest process. So we would just recommend that you look at not only the forms and the ethics policies, but also how are you going to operate on a day-to-day basis in implementing those and using those forms throughout the year. And that's why we focused being on the operationalizing the process to make sure whatever you put in place, that you have a good control in place on a daily basis to manage any potential conflicts that may exist throughout the year and not make it just a once a year type activity. The second item that we had is still is a continuing item where we see there's opportunity for management to move away from a Excel-based, capital asset inventory to a software system to better track the capital investments you're making over time, which are critical to be tracking. And management continues to do a cost-benefit analysis to determine, whether or not that's something they want to invest time in or invest money in. And so we were able to audit the fixed assets or capital assets. It's just something that may be a time saver and allow for better secure holding of that capital asset information. We're happy to report that there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in controls. If there were, you would have known about them already. So we're happy to report there are no such items to share with you today. The next letter is on page 171, and this is, I call this more of a form letter, which just outlines communicating certain things to the board. As we go through the audit, we do walk through a planning session, management, and we gain information about what's happening during the year, and we try to determine what risks may exist from a business standpoint and from a financial statement standpoint, and try to target our audit approach to address those risks. During the year, there was no significant transactions to look at, no significant accounting standard changes, kind of a boring year, which is actually kind of nice for people to look at, because we can focus on true business operations and not worry about other unusual transactions that you may have had in the past or implementing new standards. Part of what management has to do throughout the year is to make judgments and estimates that are not tied directly to a disbursement or receipt. A primary one is the allowance for doubtful accounts, which I talked about before, which was about $606,000, which they had increased due to that increase they were seeing in accounts receivable. Other areas of estimates would be the useful life and fixed assets and the information you receive from the pensions, as well as any fair value standards that may impact your investments. And then lastly, self-insurance liabilities. To the extent that you're self-insuring any of your activities, you're relying on third parties to give you information about the lag or accruals that need to be made during the year. The next section focuses on qualitative aspects. So we think about what management is doing on a day-to-day basis with their policies. Do we see any risk related to the consistency or the clarity, the timing of when they record activities? Are they motivated to record something one way or another? Those are just examples of things that we look for, and we're happy to report we did not see any motivation items or qualitative aspects that we think are a concern to the organization. And then following on that, as I mentioned, there is no audit adjustments, which is once again very positive, and also no waived audit adjustments. I think one of the things that I'm sure many of you in your own homes or in your businesses realize that COVID's had a big impact. It does have a huge impact on the accounting and finance area when you're having to work from home and also having to work with auditors remotely. So we're happy to share with you that I think management didn't really miss a beat as far as preparing for the audit and providing the information we needed. We were able to do a lot of our work remotely to get the audit done and share that with you today. So I think that's a real positive that your accounting team at the plant board can operate under some more extreme conditions and still come out with timely, accurate information. Lastly, if there were any significant difficulties or disagreements with management, we would share those with you. We're happy to say that there were no such difficulties or disagreements related to accounting or financial reporting. And we are not aware of any issues with related parties, though that's something that, as we commented to on tracking of your conflict of interest, we'll be interested in looking at what you implement in the next year and can refocus on that in the 2021 audit, I guess. So that's probably got long-winded there, but I appreciate you guys listening to the presentation. We are happy to answer any questions you might have about the audit, but overall, clean opinion, no audit adjustments, no disagreements with management, and we just had a few best practice recommendations for you to consider in the future. Thanks for your time.
If I could ask, I don't know whether you're the appropriate one to ask, or David or Hans, the one on conflict of interest. Does the conflict of interest policy that we have in front of us tonight to consider address that finding, David or Hans?
That's on page 169, David.
Yeah.
I think
Or is there something else we have to do to that policy?
I think it goes a long way. There are a few things that aren't exactly addressed, but I think your revision and looking back at conflict of interest and suiting the pleasure of this board and updating it, I think goes a long way to hitting some of these items. So to answer your question, I think for the most part, yes.
Should related party transactions, I assume we're dealing with, I think we're dealing with, do we have a provision that tells, for those who are required to do a financial disclosure, that if a change event occurs, they're responsible to notify within X days or whatever, or does that need to be added? That's in there. A standing board item, do we need to add that under like departmental reports each month?
I think that is the one part, when I say for the most part, that is the one that is not specifically hit on. If we put that as a standing item, that definitely would clear that one up. And I don't see a problem in implementing that, and would encourage that.
Right. I think the main point is what we saw, and this, as I mentioned, this recommendation goes back to our original audit, was, and I use the word operationalize. You know, many of our clients, including the plant board, have policies. And in fact, most of those policies are related to an annual disclosure, and that's one time a year. But activities happen throughout the year, and that's why we were emphasizing making sure you're looking at it throughout the year whenever there's a potential conflict. I think the key thing about conflict of interest, the word conflict of interest always connotates bad things, but we're really focusing on process. What is the process that you use to make good decisions? And a related party transaction can still be approved. It just needs to go through the process. And so that was the emphasis in our recommendation, was to try to create that to be part of your normal activities throughout the year, not just a one-time event.
Steve?
No, my question was on operationalized.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anybody else have questions on the audit? So, David, Gary, you have anything else you want to add to it?
I would, if you don't mind. Just me giving a little thank you to some people. I mean, it says a lot. A lot of things have to go right for us to have a clean audit opinion and good financial statements throughout the year. So I'd like to thank Katrina in the finance department, Angela, Andrea, Kim, and Charlie in finance, all of our managers, and any employee that touches our procurement process. It's every little transaction we do every day that adds up to get us to this point. So I just want to thank our staff, and that's all I have.
Well, I think on behalf of the board, I think we appreciate the quality of work and that your team does, and obviously this clean opinion demonstrates the hard work everybody on your team does every day to make sure everything is properly accounted for and we're accountable. So
thank you.
Well, then I need a motion to accept the audit.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Audit's accepted. And thank the people from Crow for being here tonight and for the audit.
I thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Okay. Next item is item 6.2, which is consider approval of NCTC mobile TV agreement. Harvey's here.
Hey,
how you doing, sir?
I'm great. Staff recommends approval of an agreement with the NCTC for participation in the Mobi TV agreement. FPB will participate in the managed pay TV service option. The initial term of this agreement is through November 8th, 2022. There are two-year extensions that NCTC can use to preserve the deal to 2026 if deemed beneficial to members to extend the agreement. Solution will allow FPB the opportunity to compete in a world of over-the-top delivery, rich metadata, recommendations, and time-shifted viewing. The retail pricing is going to match our existing video charges, except for one new required charge and two optional charges. Those are part of the public hearing notice, which is the next item on the agenda, but I'll just cover those real quickly. There will be an advanced application fee, which is the required charge. That'll be $5 a month per household, and then optional charges to upgrade to additional cloud DVR storage and additional streams. And this would be included in this public hearing in the next item. So the Assistant General Manager for Administration has reviewed the agreement and it meets with his approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys may have on this item.
The proposed charges that we'd have the public hearing on, the upgrade to $100 on the cloud or $250 for 10, are those standard industry or were those based on?
Yeah, it's based on what the other players in the space are charging for similar services. So yeah.
So at this point on this item, do we have to take action on this item or just on the public hearing? We have to take on both, right?
Yeah, this is to to opt into the agreement with
Okay.
Movi TV. So that's what this item is. Yep. So looking for approval on this agreement.
Okay. Does anybody have
Mr.
any
Chairman,
questions?
I would like to add a little bit that the
Sure.
$5 additional charge is actually, there's a no left for the plan board.
Okay.
Those is $5 go to the third party.
Those are just pass-throughs?
Yes.
We're not taking you that
We
far.
don't
That's-
gain any
okay.
in the process.
Okay. Bad news for you, Mr. Denton. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for Harvey on this? Seeing none, do I have a motion? A second? Dawn's got the second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion's adopted, and we've approved the contract.
Great, thank you.
So the next item comes to the public hearing. Item 6.3, which is consider approve a public hearing notice covering 1, establishing rates for fiber services, and 2, establishing rate for advanced video application service, and item 3, updating section X of the tariff. Harvey.
Thank you, sir. Staff recommends the board approve the public notice for the purpose of conducting a public hearing at the next scheduled meeting of the Frankfort Plant Board on October 20th at 5 p.m. Here in the Administration Building Community Room. You can see the public hearing notice starts at page 189 in your board package, and like you mentioned, there are 3 items, 3 pieces of the public hearing. The first will be establishing 2 new rates for our fiber delivered internet services, which will be coming down the road. We're not quite ready to turn folks on, but we know that this is a 3-month process of establishing these rates, and so we're taking the first step here tonight to do that. So you can see those rates presented to you, and then the second piece is the video charges that I mentioned in the last item. And then the third item is updating the section 10 of the tariff, which addresses the cable modem service, and it had some outdated language that we just wanted to clean up as we're establishing these new rates. So most of it is just sort of clerical, removing some things that are just not part of, technology-wise, are just not part of our offerings today. The one item that is sort of wholly new is under section, I apologize, section C and then letter D, early termination charges. We're establishing these terms for the internet offerings, the fiber internet offerings. We're going to make available to customers that are willing to sign up for a 12-month commitment to the service, a $10 discount on the rate. That'll be an optional thing. Nobody's required to sign it, but we want to give folks the opportunity to try to save some money. And so that's the language there in the tariff that's tied to that commitment. So I hope that was clear. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have on these items.
John?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think this is the first time, or this will be our first public hearing since the whole special meeting and the restricted access and stuff like that. Are there going to be any special instructions for members of the public? I know in my experience in the little time I've been here, we haven't had a ton of people show up for these
Right.
things. But, is that option for people to give information proactively?
Right,
Or
and for us to take
how's that
testimony.
going to be advertised, I guess, Harvey, in terms of getting the word out to folks?
Well, I mean, I would certainly defer to management or you guys on how to handle the meeting itself. I know in the past we have solicited email comments
Have to be, right.
but basically between today and the
Right.
public hearing. I don't know, Kathy, do you? Okay.
We haven't made final decisions on that, but my thinking is that we'll follow the city's lead and how they're doing. Like tomorrow night, they're doing a public hearing on things they're dealing with. So our thing would be that you can always submit your comments by email. But if people wanted to come in public, we would set something up where they sign up, they wait in their car, And when it's time for them to come speak, they come in. We do temperature checks with everybody that comes in. That's how they're doing it tomorrow night.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Good pop in, Miss Lindsay. Any other questions? Does everybody feel comfortable with the process that Kathy just outlined for the public hearing? Okay.
Yeah,
Any
I
other
think it's
questions?
important for people to be able to actually do it in person if they so choose.
Yes. And how will this, I mean, besides this meeting,
Mhm.
and everybody being glued to their TV at home watching this, how will people find out about this particular matter in terms of, is this another one for Kathy to pop in?
Well, yeah, I'm sure she can address that. Generally, certainly on social media, on our website, in the newspaper. I know Ms. Poe handles the notifications in the
Okay.
newspaper. We, every outlet that we can find, we
Right.
publicize those meetings.
Okay.
So Channel 10,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yep.
Okay.
Both on the bulletin board, and I imagine we'll probably talk about it on the Around 10 program too.
So basically, this would be to have this hearing, not to have a special meeting, but we'd just either, when we call the meeting to order in October, we'd basically recess for a moment, hold this hearing like we've done in the past, then reconvene back into our regular meeting?
Yeah, I'm not sure
Is
about
that what the thinking is, or to do
Yeah, I
it
mean,
at
that's
first
how
at
we've done
5
it
and do our
first- the
regular
first-
meeting like at
yeah.
5:30?
Right.
What's the board's pleasure on that? The times I've been here in the past, we've had during the meeting, we've had to, conduct the hearing during, then go back to, does that seem?
I only hope that the vice chair is able to be here, so I don't have to run the special hearing
Yes,
like Gavin
but-
had.
But let me say for the record, Mr. Snyder, you were outstanding in pitch hitting that day. Kathy, did you want
No, I was just making sure that's,
to? Okay.
that's what we've done before, so.
Okay. Any other questions or whatever? So I need a motion to approve holding the public hearing during the October 20th board meeting regarding to establishing rates for fiber service.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Harvey.
Thank you all very much.
Item 6.4, consider approval of board governance policy. Ms. Hale.
Okay. The board governance policy has been incorporated into the bylaws. You all have it in the packet. Catherine pointed out some redundancy that she saw that, you want to go ahead and talk about, Catherine?
Sure. If you'll turn to Article 8, down to subsection 7, there's an A, B, and C. And Article 8 is really about board duties. But then if you go all the way down to Article 19, it's really about conduct of the board. And it's almost the verbatim language if you look at subsection 8 and that A, B, and C. And it seems like these provisions in Article 8, subsection 7, A, B, and C, about interaction with the general manager and the media, and judgments about general managers or staff's performance fit better down in Article 19 where they already are. So my suggestion would just be that we remove it from Article 8 and leave it at Article 19.
Okay. And if everybody remember, I think the board's talked about this for a number of months. And at one point we were going to talk about having a governance policy and then the bylaws. And I think John brought up the possibility of not having to go to two places and just have one document. So this is basically, and we had talked originally about if we, at some point having a board work session, we were going to have three topics. We were going to have the governance policy, compensation, and then talk about some revised personnel practices. Those last two items are still kind of in the process. So in talking with Dawn, we've got the option to bring this in front of us tonight, which we could take action on, or still defer it to a work session. But if it's ready and everyone feels comfortable, we can certainly take action tonight. And so I guess Mr. Snyder,
Do
correct
we
me.
need, we need to probably have a motion on it before we can amend it, I would
Right.
imagine.
That'd be my understanding.
So, Dawn, if you'd like to make the motion.
Okay, just before that, Steve, did you have?
I'm not
something?
sure if it was in ethics or the bylaws. But my question was, it says family or immediate family.
Okay, that's in the.
That's in the ethics.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so,
Okay, so I'll make a motion to accept the revised bylaws.
No, first, I guess it'd be, the
Yeah.
motion would be to accept the
Motion
bylaws that are
accepted,
here.
Then we'll amend it.
Right.
Then we'll amend.
Then we'll amend them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
Well, but these are revising the current bylaws.
Well, you'll make a motion to adopt these bylaws, and then Catherine will be able to make her amendment once we've got that motion in front of us.
Okay. So I make a motion to adopt these bylaws,
Which would
No.
replace the current
which will
bylaws.
replace
Yeah.
the current.
And I'll make a
bylaws.
second of that motion, so we've got
Okay.
that in front of us. Now it'd be up to anybody who would want to make an amendment. It would be appropriate to do so at this time.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second to adopt the bylaws that are in front of us right now and would supersede the current bylaws. We have a motion and second. Do we have any discussion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion, if that's appropriate now, to delete subsection 7 from Article 8 due to redundancy at subsection 8, Article 19.
And I will second that motion.
Okay, so I have a motion and second to make that amendment. Does everybody understand that amendment? Okay, so without further discussion, if there's no further discussion, we have a motion to make that amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, so that amendment's adopted.
Can
So
I just
now,
say something real quick?
sure,
I just want to thank everybody. This is something that,
it's not through yet.
we're not done yet.
well,
Don't be spiking the ball in the infield yet.
Everybody make another
sorry about that.
So now,
Motion
we have
second in front of us.
we have in front of us
Yeah.
the bylaws as presented in the book, as amended, for final adoption. So do I have a motion on,
You've already got it.
you got a motion from John, do I have a second?
She's already made.
Okay,
the
made a
motion.
second, so we
She's
got a
already made
motion
the
second.
We already got it.
So, you got all that, Kathy?
Yes, sir, I have it. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the bylaws as presented before us today, as amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Bylaws are adopted. Now, Ms. Hale.
Okay, now, I would like to thank everybody for looking at this, participating and doing it, because it's something that I've worked on for a long time, and I really appreciate you all's input and being willing to do it. Thanks.
Mr.
you.
Chairman, is there
Thank
a
you for
way
your work.
through
Huh?
Robert's Rule that I can bring this back up for reconsideration?
That's right, because you voted on the prevailing side. That's right, yes.
Thank you, Don, for your hard work on it.
I appreciate it.
Next is, I'd like to switch them around and go to item 6.6. And 6.6 is consider approval of the Ethics Committee makeup and appointment, because that could have an impact on what we vote on in 6.5. The current ethics policy, our current ethics policy is a 3-member board. And we are fortunate that we've had 7 citizens come forward and indicate they're interested in serving. So we're faced with, and then the further question is do we want to, in our policy, make some type of designation or allocation that if we have a 3-member board, ethics board, that at least 2 from the city, 1 from the county, or no designation, it could be 3 from anywhere, or if we would move to a 5-member board, that we would have, say, 3 from the city, 2 from the county, or 4 from the city, 1 from the county, to make that decision. So the first is, open it up for discussion. Do we want to change the size? And there, I can see it both ways. I mean, in a way, it gives you more flexibility if you've got 1 or 2 members who can't come, whatever. In another, you may always be fortunate enough to find 7 people who are willing to serve. So it's got good and bad. So open it up for discussion. Do we want to change it from 3 to 5? Catherine?
I really hope we do consider extending it to 5-member. I think it's, it would make quorum 3 people, so you would always have at least 3 people discussing and considering what could be a very significant issue of concern to anybody on staff or the board. It still could come down to 2 people, a 2-to-1 vote, but it would never be just a 2-person vote, which by our current,
Right.
so I would like us to consider extending it to 5.
I agree. I think, the city's initially was 3. And after going through an ethics process, we saw the necessity and importance of having more than just 3 people on the board, because Frankfort's a small town and it's very easy to have relationships with people that would make one have to recuse themselves, and then you leave it with like only 2 people. So I agree with Catherine. I think it would be really good to extend it to 5.
Steve?
5.
Yeah,
John?
I'm good, yeah.
Taking it, the next step would be, what would be your all's preference in terms of an allocation or designation in terms of city or county representation? We could either have no designation, we could go 3-2, 4-1, whatever. Any feeling?
Let me ask, what is the current, what's the current, where are we currently on the 3? Do they all have to be city residents, or they?
The proposal is for 3 with two in the city
So
and 1 in the county. And I think Ms. Hale had, it was that way, it was drafted that way because it thought, well, the city, county,
Right.
city.
Right.
But that was why.
Now, the current board right now that we currently have, does it have any designation at all? It doesn't, does it? It's just 3,
It does,
period.
okay, it does not, okay. But do they have to be customers of FPB or not? Under the current policy?
I don't think there's a requirement.
Okay.
And if we did with customers, then the question would be, do they have to have, not all service, would they have
Just
at
one
least
se- yeah,
one
right,
service?
right.
Could they have just cable or just internet or
Right.
just telephone or whatever?
The city's version and our version that's being modeled on, it's a residency in the city or the
Okay.
county.
Residency in the city.
For a year.
Okay.
I would make the qualifications the same it is for the planning board members,
Yeah.
directors.
Yeah.
Which is
No designation.
just no designation?
There is none.
Yeah.
Okay. Just 5. So,
But they would have service.
Right.
Yeah.
they have to have some FPB service
Yes.
of some type.
Mhm.
So what I'm sensing is we've got interest of 5 members with no city or county designation, but must at least be, have at least 1 FPB service.
Customers, yeah.
Don?
I don't know, we're a city agency.
Mhm.
And I think we should represent both the city and the county. But I don't know if I would want to risk having it all county.
Yeah.
When if you don't make a designation, it could end up being all county.
I
Of
mean,
course, theoretically, we could be all county right now, right?
Well,
This board. If the mayor appointed 5 from the
Yeah.
county. He's
Yeah.
not limited, right?
and the point is, as you said earlier, for the argument for going from 3 to 5, we are a small town. I'm not sure if I live in the county, but I don't really feel like I'm a county person. I don't know what a county person.
When I'm in the city, you're in the county, and I live across the street from, one road separates us, yeah.
So I don't.
I'm okay with it.
I mean, Catherine?
I would like to see representation in both. And I kind of look to see right now, which I'm so grateful that so many people
Yes.
are volunteering. So if this is kind of our guide to the future of interest in serving in this capacity, I think it would be okay having a designation of a certain amount of city and a certain amount of county.
What's your all's pleasure? We don't have any motion on the floor. I've just kind of I mean, I think we've got consensus. We still have to vote on it, obviously. We still seem to have general consensus on 5. It seems like we have general consensus on you have to be some FPB customer getting some service.
Mr. Chairman, let me
Yes,
ask you
sir.
a question. The ethics, the makeup of the commission, and everything, that's going to be part of the ethics.
Mhm,
That's going to
yes.
be part of the, so that we're just kind of giving direction on this tonight. We're not actually going to take a vote on, we're kind of giving direction to Hans and Dawn in terms of how to write.
Well, this actually, that's why I took this one first, took them out of
Okay.
sequence. If we adopt this, then when we adopt
The ethics,
the ethics bill, we would basically
okay.
fold that into the
Okay.
ethics thing, that would be an amendment drafted into it.
Okay.
So it would be, if we adopted the ethics, it would be 6.5 as amended by 6.6.
Okay. I would be okay if Catherine feels strongly about county representation. I would feel strongly about it. Whatever number you'd want to have, I could go along with that as well. I'm not tied either way to it. I mean, it's just that, that's a little more stringent than, the requirements to serve on the plant board itself.
Right.
But, that's just the way it is, so.
Steve? I'm sorry.
I think in the past, plant board members have had to resign when they moved into the county. So I think traditionally, plant board members previously have been city residents.
You want to address that letter to Bill May?
Well, again, for me, I think it should be what the plant board requirements are. I mean, I just don't see that big a difference between the two groups, two public entities, if you will. And I guess it's ironic that I'm the one that's saying that, but I just don't see the difference.
Yeah. Well, we can do it one of two ways. We could have a motion with 5, require some FPB service, and at least 4 to 1 rep, say, for example, or we could have a motion that went 5 members have to have some FPB service, and they would have to be a resident of Franklin County. So I guess at this point, we're open for whoever wants to make a motion. I can make the motion if you want to see if we have a, or Kathy, you want to?
Can I make one more point,
Sure.
though? And I haven't completely thought this through, but, and I think some other people have a similar idea about wanting diversity as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know that county versus city accomplishes that, but I'd like to discuss that if anybody else has the same feeling.
Well, I obviously I'm for diversity, but again, but I have to separate the two, because you can perhaps find diversity whichever way you go. I just really don't see that big of a difference. I mean, it's not like Frankfort, Louisville, that you got Oklahoma and St.
Right.
Matthews, and there's totally different cultures and everything else. Franklin County is Frankfort, and Frankfort is Franklin County, and if it's not required of us, then I don't know why we're requiring it of someone that's, I guess, organizationally under us or adjacent to us.
I think as long as they have plant board service of some kind, that's good enough.
Okay. Well, then I would make the motion that item 6.6 is that a newly constituted Frankfort Plant Board Ethics Committee be composed of 5 members. It would be required that anyone who serves on the Ethics Committee has to have some current plant board service, and that they be appointed from a list or nominees that is Franklin County wide. So I throw that motion out to see if anybody wants to make a motion.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's adopted. So when we consider 6.5, which we'll go back to, please note that to the extent there's any correction, that it would be 5 members. They have to have at least one plant board service and be a resident of Franklin County. And that would be incorporated to 6.5 if we adopt it. So now item 6.5 is approval of Code of Ethics and Financial Disclosure. Ms. Hale and Hans, and I know Hans, you've done some work since the last time. So maybe if you want to lead off, that's all right with you, Dawn.
Oh,
And
yeah,
just
that's good.
based on the last meeting, what changes you made based on the last discussion?
Yes, sir. Thank you. The last month, we discussed this and went through the policy, so I'll be brief here. I made Mr. Schneider's edits, deleted the few parenthetical comments that were referenced. I took a look at the language at the top on page 253, dealing with the political solicitation question. Did some research, found some cases. It's a pretty high bar for a public agency to put restrictions on an employee's ability to participate in the election process. So that case kind of confirmed what I thought. Laura Ross got back to me just before the meeting today. Perfect timing, in fact. And her thought was that language needs to remain in there. That kind of confirmed my view. She's got a lot of experience with public agency law, so that's reassuring. Mr. KyMEA at the pre-agenda meeting had some good suggestions with respect to what about state or federal election laws? How does that factor into it? So the language that I sort of settled on, and I once we approve the policy, I know it says a clean copy in the agenda item, but I can turn this highlight off when everybody is had a chance to look at it. It's down there, D, little I there. The solicitation or acceptance of contributions to campaigns doesn't apply to it, as long as the individuals don't identify themselves with the Frankfort Plant Board or act inconsistently with applicable state or federal election laws. So you really don't know what state or federal election law to kind of reference at this point, because if it changes over time, then your policy will sort of track that too. And that might be one of those questions that the Ethics Committee takes up in the future, is just what particular set of circumstances would that fall into. And then that last little section there, that language was always in there. So that was the first sort of question that we wanted to resolve from last month. And then the other issue that I had there was on page 257 of your PDF packet there, and that was the composition of the committee, which we just discussed. That was we settled 5 members with the current FPB service that is a Franklin County resident. Was sort of what I will revise and put in here. The other question was, do we want to have the staggered terms? That would be
Yeah, I would.
So there
think so.
at the let's see, I'm trying to find that. Terms will be staggered and no longer for no longer for 3 years down there. It's on page 257, A1 in that paragraph there. So we'll have 5 members, and then the board can stagger the weeks. Mr. KyMEA came up with we kind of talked a little bit before about how the board could stagger the various terms. So that's all the comments that I have for the updates. Thank you.
What I was going to suggest is because we don't need to do it until if we adopt this policy, then we need to kind of taxi back, and there's 3 ways that talking to Hans I've come up with, and I'm certainly open to any others. We've got 7 nominees, or 7 people who've expressed interest based on people who've expressed interest and so forth. Everybody could make individual nominations till we get to 5. If someone wanted to propose a slate, that would be fine for everybody to consider. And the last was that Hans has prepared a box with all the names in it. And I guess before we started, we ought to read the names off, what names are in the box.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Mr. Larry. What's the difference between family or immediate family members?
That goes up in your very first page of the policy and the definition. Family member is pretty broad. Immediate family member is a narrower definition. And immediate family member is what the financial disclosure form uses. So with the financial disclosure form, you'd be filling out just for your spouse, your tax dependents, and I'm trying to think if there's one other category of that. But if you were to fill out a financial disclosure form for your first cousins, it would be much too broad a task to try and complete. And that's sort of the...
Well, but again, in the statement it says, in order to obtain a financial benefit for any of the following. So
What page are you?
I'm on page 5, I think.
Yeah, the definition under, as page 251, immediate family means a spouse, an unemancipated child residing in the employer or board member's household, or a person claimed by the employer or board member or the employee's board member spouse as a dependent for tax purposes.
I think Steve's question, if
Okay.
you go to page 5 or 255, I think, Steve, what you're concerned about there is number 2, where it says a member of their family or immediate family.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I just think you can say family, because immediate family is included under the definition of family. If someone was a member of your immediate family, it would meet the definition of a family member, right, Hans?
I'm
Sure.
taking, which you're
You're fine.
at the top of page 255?
255, yeah.
Okay.
It says a member of their family or immediate family. My wife is both. My son who still lives at home is both. So we could actually even take out immediate family there if we wanted to, because everybody that's in your immediate family is a member of your family. That's an uncomfortable silence there.
I didn't know that you're right, yes.
Okay.
and did we,
I thought
is family
you were
defined
basically
anywhere?
Yes,
Yeah, on page-
family member is, yeah.
Page 251.
It's up on page
Okay.
1.
Okay, I
Yeah.
get it.
Page 1, page 251 is page 1 of the policy, yeah.
Okay.
The family member definition is derived from the third degree relative requirement comes from
Okay.
the KRS.
Yeah.
And then I found an AG opinion that finally defined kind of what the third degree relative were. And then family member also encompasses what the city has to mirror their policy. So that's how that got put together. But you're correct, Mr. Commissioner Schneider, we can take that out if that's the board's. That's the board's preference there at the top of 255.
If it's appropriate, Mr. Chair, I would make a. Do we have this in front of us already?
I think that's the next step is,
Okay.
so we've got 2. The first question is, do I have a motion to consider item 6.5, approval of Code of Ethics and Financial Disclosure Form? And Dawn, at this point, Hans had, anything you wanted to add at this point?
No, it's good for me.
Okay. First, do we have a motion on item 6.5?
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Got a second? Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to amend the proposed ethics code on page 5. Let me get up to it here.
On the top of what, 255?
Yes, 255 in the board packet. Under subparagraph 2, where it says a member of their family or immediate family, I would just move that we strike the words immediate family
Okay.
or immediate family.
Okay. So, the question then before us is, we have item 6.5 as amended by Mr. Snyder's motion to make a technical or a correction on page 255, item 2 at the top of the page, and recognizing that Hans would also make the technical corrections to comply with item 6.6, which we dealt with on board composition. So that would be the motion we'd have in front of us right now on this policy.
I have a question. Does that all, in the motion for this 6.5, does that also include the financial interest form?
Yes.
That's a great question. My next question. Perfect.
That's my understanding is it's all one package, isn't it?
Well,
The way you have it put here in the,
If you could add that to your motion, the code and the financial disclosure form, that would make it clear for the auditors and so forth. We have
Catherine, you want to?
Yes, so my motion is to accept the proposed ethics policy and attached proposed financial interest form.
Plus
Plus the
your
amendment.
second.
Plus
And
to
then,
incorporate 6.6 and the amendment that I just made.
and do we want to roll into that motion the provision from the auditors that we'd have a monthly report on those disclosures that would bring us into compliance with those audit recommendations? And they would just be part of department reports.
That'd be
And that
just
would be-
fine if it's
and
the
that'd be
board's
for
pleasure.
Hans.
We can just do that.
Yeah, or do we need to include that so the auditors can consider that as part of our audit response and get rid of that finding?
I think that'd be great. It's just that third bullet point on page 169 of the board packet, under the conflict of interest comment, up to creating a standard board agenda item or consideration of any potential or agreed upon related party transactions that may be on the board agenda.
And we can say to be presented by the general counsel each month. Like you wanted something else to do, right, Hans? You're welcome. So everybody's got the motion that we're voting on in the second? So is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's adopted. Ms. Hale, this is a big night for you, buddy.
It is.
Thank you all.
In my third year, I'm getting stuff done.
Yeah,
I've been trying.
good job on this, so seriously. And thanks, Hans, for all your
Well,
work.
Hans really put in a lot of time and effort, and I really appreciate it, Hans.
Now, the last part of this is we've adopted the policy, we've adopted the size of the ethics committee. We have 7 nominees, and the first question is, do you all want to vote on them individually? As someone which we could do, each of us could nominate someone, we could do it as a slate. Someone could propose 5 names, or Hans has all 7 names in a box that we could let Gary know, which Gary is not aware of. We could let Gary draw out the 5 names, and since we don't have to worry about city or county designation, those 5 names, and I'd propose just throwing this out, the first 2 names serve 3-year terms, the second 2 names serve 2-year, and the last one serve 1. Steve?
Actually, I have a motion to make, and it
Sure.
involves that too. I don't know if you want me to name names, but I have a slate that I'd like to make a motion to.
Sure.
And then have a box with 1, 2, or 3, and Hans can pick out, one with whoever the person
who serves
is.
what term,
Yeah. But I'd make a motion that the ethics committee be comprised of Robert Brewer, Courtney Carter, Jill Master, Maria Bush, and Steve Reeder.
Read them again.
Robert Brewer. Jack Brewer.
Jack Brewer.
Robert went to school with my son, and I keep saying Robert.
Was he a nominee too, or?
No.
No.
No, he was a classmate of my son, and I keep going back to him.
Okay, Jack Brewer.
Courtney Carter, Jill Master, Maria Bush, and Stephen Reeder. And that, depending however the terms are, that Hans choose if those are selected, or whomever selected, that the terms will be put in the page, and Hans can pull out a term to go with every, and that way it's a random selection of
terms.
their terms.
So the motion that Steve's throwing out is that he's proposed Jack Brewer, Courtney Carter, Jill Master, and Steve Reeder, and then for the remaining,
and Maria Bush.
and Maria Bush. So that's all 5.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
all 5.
So we wouldn't need to draw any names out of the.
Not under my motion.
Yeah. Okay.
I second.
Anybody else have any other discussion about any other different way to do it?
It's fine with me.
Okay, so we have a motion by Steve. Should we do it that way in terms of just, I guess, can you quickly draw up five cards, Hans, with terms on them? Was everybody okay with 2 3s, 2 2s, and a 1? Does that work?
Yeah, yeah.
And then, how's the best way to do that? We know the terms.
Somebody would notify.
How to assign the terms to the names.
Well, what Steve said, just put the names in the box.
All those names.
Draw out, the first one is the 1-year term.
Okay,
The
I just
second
say the
two-
name and someone draws out and that's it.
okay.
Yeah.
So the first 2 drawn would be the 3, next 2 the 2,
Well,
and then,
whatever the first name is, if you say like Steve Reader, you can draw a number out and that's his term.
sure,
You know,
okay.
that way, it's all.
So you want to do that as one vote, we'll read a name with an assigned term, and then we'll vote on that as a package?
Well, first you got to see if this slate is approved.
Right.
Then you can,
Yeah.
you can come back
And
and
then we'll come back to that part.
do that.
Okay.
yeah.
So the first one is, we've got a motion and a second. So, is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Congratulations to the new Ethics Commission. So the next would be is to assignment of terms. You ready?
You want to, so how are we gonna
You
assign?
can let, as long as you're off here in the full camera, you can pull one out. Pull up, which if you go with the first person, whoever you have on the list,
Mm-hmm.
say the name and then that hands pull out a number.
Okay. Gary, you want to come over here and draw the names? Draw the number?
Jack Brewer.
Yeah. It's your chance for,
You don't need their name.
You don't need their name.
it's your
You need
chance for the big screen.
Hands. You need the number, not the name.
Well, that's okay. If he's got the names, we can just.
Okay, yeah,
we
you can
just
put the
say
name,
3-year
yeah, put the
term.
names in there and just,
That's what I was trying to figure
yeah.
out. I've got to make sure I get the right names in there. Jack Brewer. Carter. There you go.
So the
First two or 3-year terms. Is this what we agreed on?
First 2 or 3 year, right.
First 2 or 3-year terms.
So that's just the first one. Pull one name out. Okay. One name. Here we go. Steve Reader,
3-year term.
3-year term. Name number 2, sir. Courtney Carter is a 3-year term.
Mhm.
Name number 3. Thank you. Is Jack Brewer. And now we're switching to a
2-year term.
2-year term.
2-year term.
And name number 4 is going to be Maria Bush. That would be a
2-year term, and then LeMaster would be the 1-year.
1-year term.
last one. I'm sorry, didn't mean to jump in. Ms. Lemaster is a 1-year term.
Mr. Snyder, since to continue your role as expert parliamentarian, do we need a motion on these terms?
Depends on whether the original motion was to stagger the terms, but
It probably wouldn't hurt.
it wouldn't hurt to say, based on the draw from our esteemed general manager, I would move that the 5 members we just appointed serve the following initial terms. Steve Reader serving a term of 3 years, Carter 3 years, Bush and Brewer 2 years, and LeMaster 1 year. And then after those initial terms expire, have every term serve for 3 years.
Yeah,
Okay, can I ask you to make one mod?
Yes.
And to amend the ethics policy to be consistent with your motion there.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes, and to direct Hans to make amendments to the ethics policy to incorporate
Technical
those-
corrections.
Technical
Yeah.
corrections, yes.
Thank you.
It's just the agency cleanup bill, right?
Been there, done that.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Adopted. What a process.
Yeah.
Okay, last item is item
6.7.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, looked at the bottom. Item 6.7, consider internally restricting 25 million of FPB cash investment balance of funds, 9.15 million for advanced metering infrastructure, smart meter project, 4.5 million for water reservoir replacement project, and 11.35 million for telecommunications infrastructure improvement. Electric division cash investment funds will be used for water and telecommunication projects, will be paid back to the electric division plus 1% interest over the term set by staff. Mr. Denton?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as the motion stated, we are asking the board to internally restrict $25 million for 3 large projects. It was just last month the board approved the vendor for the advanced metering infrastructure project. That is electric and water project, electric and water meters. That's 9.15 million. Water reservoir is moving forward with the discussion we had prior in the meeting to be bid and eventually construction starting in spring. That's 4.5 million that we'd like to set aside, and also 11.35 million for upgrades to our telecommunications infrastructure that would set that division up to provide excellent service for decades to come. So we're just asking the board to restrict those monies. When you look at our current cash and investment balance of $46 million, as I mentioned during the financial portion of this meeting, we've gotten to that cash balance in a couple of ways. These 3 projects have been budgeted for 1 or more years. Each of these projects has been delayed for one reason or another, all good reasons. So we've accumulated cash for these projects because rates were set to cover these projects and debt service related. Also, the change to wholesale power provider in May of 19 has significantly reduced wholesale power cost, which is adding to this as well. Good news, as I mentioned, in our assets of a utility company are by far the largest asset of the utility. It's very important that we keep our infrastructure up to date and provide the services that our customers want and safe and reliable service. So we request the board to set these monies aside.
And this, as I understand, would address 3 things. One, it needs to be addressed in the current audit in terms of these funds. 2, we're borrowing, by not having to go to the commercial market to borrow funds, we're avoiding bond counsel fees, closing costs, and all those fees. And customers will get a net savings because we'll be paying lower interest rate than we would have had we borrowed from the market. And this money will be paid back, and it will be available for future use by the plant board when it's paid back.
Yes, sir. It's worth noting that in good utility practice, we will directly allocate cost of the plant board, operating cost and infrastructure projects, debt service, directly allocate those to each division, the electric, water, telecom division. Costs that cannot be directly allocated, we have a method that we use to allocate those costs to each division to get us to what it costs to provide the service to the customer. Allows us to set rates appropriate for each service. We want to minimize cross-subsidization between divisions. So any monies that are allocated and considered electric reserves that are used for a water or telecom project would be repaid by that division that used the funds at a rate of 1%, and terms that we would set between 10 and 30 years is what we're looking at depending on the project. We would not have a term, internal loan term that would be longer than the depreciable life of the asset, which is very important. And this 1% interest is similar to what we would get on a savings rate if those funds were just to be sitting in a bank account. So a third-party lender, if we go out to issue bonds or go to a third-party lender, would be much higher than a 1%. So yes, the ratepayers are going to get advanced services for the community. We're also going to save money on interest expense that we would otherwise have. And it's an all-around win, I believe, for the plant board and our customers.
Ben, do you have any thoughts on it, or?
No, sir. Well, except just to say that, I agree. I mean, I think this is a good way to identify the projects that we need to have done, and it's a good way rather than going out to the bond market for these type of things. I think both sides of our customers win. Both we we are able to keep the individual departments without the cross subsidies that are so important to make sure the rates are fair and equitable. And then at the same time, we'll save money over what the loans would be if we were going out that side. So I think it's a good setup for the entire company as well as the ratepayers.
Gary, you have any thoughts on it, or?
No, I agree. I think that's a really reasonable policy and also benefit ourselves.
Open up to the board for any questions. Steve?
No, I want to agree with David. I think it's good fiscal policy for us to utilize our assets within the agency, thus avoiding some of the costs you're talking about. And in the long run, the ratepayer will see, will realize the savings from doing that by obligating these monies
Right.
in this way.
Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we internally restrict $25 million of FPB cash investment balance to fund the projects mentioned, to be paid, electric division cash investments to be paid back with 1% interest over terms set by staff.
Do you have a second?
So moved.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's adopted. Thank you, Mr. Denton. Gary, do you have any comments for us? Words of wisdom, inspiration? No? Okay, if there's no further business, do you have a motion for adjournment?
Can I just
Oh,
say one
sure.
thing beforehand?
Yeah.
I noticed on Facebook today that was posted, I want to thank whoever posted it, that someone here in Frankfort, or wherever they were, had their Windstream knocked out from the storm the other day. And Windstream couldn't get to them for 9 days. And how our people, when the storm knocks it out, we're on it. So I just wanted to thank our people for being so diligent and to have people recognize the advantage of having a local public utility.
And the staff did, exactly what Dawn said. The staff's incredible as far as responding to calls, complaints. And I think I've had a couple of people have to call, they've told me personally, called to knock, after hours. And I think they're doing a great job there in terms of being responsive and trying to work out solutions. Certainly even that evening, they can do something for people, so.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because it's, hey, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any further discussion, any objections? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
I did want to bring up, Joe, that I watched the football game on cable